Today I'm delighted to have with me Yat-Sing Cheng. I was introduced to Yat through a mutual friend, Pepita McKee, a wonderful woman, and she had called me one day saying, "Oh, I just thought of it, you're always talking about risk, and I know this great guy and he's always talking about risk. You guys should talk." I'm like, "Well, what kind of risk?" She goes, "I don't know, just talk to him." I'm like, "Okay." And then we actually met in person, had a great conversation. So thank you for being here, Yat.
Yes, my pleasure.
So tell us a little bit about your background and what kind of risk we're going to be talking about today.
Sure. My background is accounting and finance in nature. So I think I got into the risk world through the role of an auditor, external financial statement auditor with Ernst & Young. And from that, different roles and different activities kind of led me through some very significant parts of different organizations' changes. So right out of the gate, we were part of the team that basically absolved the different health regions in the province of Alberta, and we became the Super Board Alberta Health Services, where we basically oversaw the provincial healthcare system, and we were on the administration side. So my involvement during that time was to bring together pretty much, 13 different investment portfolios. I was the director of debt and investment, and I had to consolidate and make sure we were on side in terms of the types of investments that we got involved with, as well as consolidating our debt load so that it was more efficient and effective. And the purpose of it was really just to strategically save us a lot of costs and increase our efficiency in how we managed and operated the various health services that we provided. From my perspective, it was a very niche part in that it was all about how we bring our financial and treasury type of function together and try to make it more effective and more efficient so that it can actually be directed to the right health services. So really trying to create a strategy around how does investments and debt management kind of fit into a healthcare system. So lots of different experiences through that process, including having to participate with our legal team and rewrite a clause within our Alberta Health Act at that time to accommodate the types of investments that made sense for an institution of that size. So under investment management, we were handling about $5.some billion in assets. That was a lot of fun, and it was challenging to say the least, but it was the first foray into understanding strategy, risk, and then process design and controls. From there, I jumped out of the public sector and was VP Finance for a development firm where we were really into the industrial product of the real estate world. And so that was the polar opposite in terms of how we saw risk, because in that world, risk meant potential reward if managed properly. And so it was an opportunistic type of an approach to how we, saw and managed risk. So you saw the upside by taking on the right amount of calculated risk. And so that just kind of deepened my understanding and my breadth of knowledge on how we, do a risk and reward kind of a balanced decision making. Being VP and a senior leader of that group also allowed us to start to look at things operationally so that, again, we're trading off, how much effort we put towards efficiencies, compliance, and so forth, but not slowing down the business of the organization to the point where we lose out on opportunities. So that further enhanced my entrepreneurial aspects of it. And then lastly, for the last 7 or so years, I got involved with enterprise risk management for the University of Calgary. And during that time, I was version 4 or version 5 of the program, trying to kickstart what enterprise risk management means. And fortunately, I was successful and created and implemented the program for roughly this last 6 or 7 years. Ultimately, it got to the point where I started to basically coach and do workshops and facilitations around this topic of risk and reward and strategy management. And that led me to basically going into my own consulting business as people were becoming more and more aware of where ERM is useful and how to make it practical so that it functions within the organization as an aid to how we make decisions so that we can properly execute on our strategies. And that's kind of how I got to here.
Yeah. Sorry for interrupting. So just to clarify for our audience, because there's different types of risk, we're talking about enterprise risk management. So can you just briefly define that?
Yeah, sure. So for those of us that are analytical in nature, I will give you the formal written definition. It's a little dry, but this is the actual one coming out of ISO 31000 standards. So ERM is a process that focuses on the identification and management of challenges and uncertainties that could affect the achievement of objectives in a coordinated manner. What that really means is it's, first of all, a formal process. It is a process that is designed and meant to be a repeatable function so that you're able to identify, analyze, and ultimately make decisions on a consistent basis. But it's a framework, so it's malleable. It conforms to how an organization is maturing in their understanding of risk and reward management. But in layman terms, I would say it's a very specific way to communicate what is possibly a very convoluted and personal definition of risk. And so by having it directed in such a specific manner, you're actually allowed to then contextualize everything in a similar language so that when you tell somebody this is an enterprise level risk, everyone in that room should have the same or similar understanding of how urgent that problem is, or possibly even to discount it to say it's not enterprise level. But it's a focused effort on why, as an organization, we are here to perform, like certain duties and so forth. Our mandate, our vision and mission statements are really the purpose for why any of us go to work for the most part. And so this kind of forces us to look at it in a very specific manner so that we can repeat this process so that we can consistently address the various types of risks that come out. So it's not just one type of risk, but it's all risks within the organization.
And why is risk management so important to companies and organizations?
Because every action or inaction that we take as an individual, as an organization, as a department, or as a group is a risk and reward trade-off decision. What I mean by that is if I was giving you the very micro decision of saying you're going to head out the door and you're going to either turn left down the street or turn right down the street, whichever direction you go down is actually a trade-off of a risk and reward calculation you're doing in your head. So if your office is to the right of the street and you choose to go left, you're actually making the decision to give up either time and efficiency in order to go left for a specific purpose. Perhaps it's because it's a more scenic route. Perhaps you need to extend the time frame so that you can have clearer thoughts. But you're trading off a certain amount of risk to that reward. Similarly, if you hang a right, you're going to make a decision based on saving time and efficiency so that perhaps you can get to the task at hand faster. But that's a risk-reward decision-making, and you're managing that risk in order to achieve that reward, or in other words, that objective. So from a micro level such as that, you break that into a bigger scale and you make it an enterprise problem. Now your decision is, do I enter into this disruptive technology and throw X number of dollars towards it to make it successful? Or do I stay status quo and I continue to just further increase my market share and use the money that way in order to dominate the existing marketplace with different rewards based on that? So you can imagine that might be a decision that Blockbuster had made way back when Netflix became something that they had to decide on. That is a risk and reward trade-off. And that's why it's important for organizations to have this, is because you want to have the ability to contextualize questions, problems, hurdles in the same manner so that you can make a decision on what reward is reasonable to you.
And so at what level would you, from your standpoint, say this person is now enterprise level and they need my help? Because it sounds like everyone, every company has risks. At what level do you come in and start adding value? Is that a certain employee size, revenue size?
What would drive the need or the value of having established an ERM framework such as this is when you start to get complex as an organization. If you were a single decision maker in your organization, you're the president, the buck stops with you, you're also the bottleneck of all this information flowing through the organization. So in that particular description, what that means is you have all the information and you're able to extract that from your various leaders so that you can make a final decision. For companies of that size or that level of complexity, enterprise risk management is probably not as critical to you other than learning how to make decisions, how to rank your risks and rate your risks in different heat map scenarios. That's really the extent that you really require, because you know the information and you have the capability of getting that information through dialogue, through conversation, and you can extract it in a way that makes sense to you so that you can make a prioritized decision. When an organization starts hiring significant leaders for very significant functions, that's when ERM is important, because that's where you start to homogenize your discussions and your decision making, and it requires a level of transparency and objectivity so that people can speak up and bring real issues to the leadership board so that they can collectively discuss, analyze, really beat it up to decide what's the future state of the company you're developing. So I would say who needs ERM are the individuals that are starting to grow organically and have started to realize that things are starting to become muddied in their decision making. It's no longer clear which particular risk should be tackled first. And so when you have a need to clarify those things and prioritize those decisions, that's a good time for us to start having that conversation to say, are you at the stage where we need to look at a risk management formalization?
And what's the value of ERM?
The value of ERM is you start to deal with, in a very practical manner, mutually exclusive end goals. If you've got risks, right, and let's take two of the more common risks. You have the risk of inability to fund Project X versus the inability to ensure that the security of your data is properly protected against malware, against phishing attacks, against all these other things. When a manager or director comes to you and says, these are the two problems that we think are the biggest things we have to deal with, how do you make the decision as to which one you do? Because you have finite resources, but basically unlimited wants. And so the value of ERM is you are able to start to delineate different values coming out of that. So if funding is looked at from a strategic initiative, like which funding does this initiative support, that will allow you to start looking at, well, maybe the IT part isn't as critical because the strategy that is being impacted is much more of a financial decision than it is an IT decision. And so you're now able to start to look at funding as the part that you need to start throwing resources to mitigate or to manage. And then IT might take a very close second step, and you may decide maybe we do a triage approach and just band-aid what we absolutely have to do. Or vice versa, you could then actually turn around and actually say, you know, maybe it's the fact that we have to table this resource management till a later time. And ERM creates that ability to come back and revisit this same situation, dialogue about it in the same language, so that you can try again to see if the situation has changed to the point where you would change where you deploy your resources. So that's one of the very biggest challenges that when I talk to a company, those are the things that they're challenged by. What happens when I have two risks that look like they're on fire, but I don't know which one to approach first, or do I have to do both, partially? The other values that ERM will do is it drives and assigns accountability to your other leaders. It forces you to delegate those tasks, and it allows you to start monitoring key components of their performance, specifically to manage these hurdles so that you become successful in your strategic objectives. In doing so over and over again, as I said, it's repeatable. And so this repeat process makes your culture risk aware. And when you're risk aware, everyone starts to learn that 10,000 hours of experience, and they become more adept at projecting kind of potential future problems that may be further down the pipe, but it's something they are now aware of. And your sense of ability to control that or to anticipate it will also help you reduce the number of hurdles that prevent you from being successful. So it's prioritize decision-making, it's resource deployment, and it's all about supporting the leadership of what your organization's mission and vision and strategic objectives are.
And if someone listening now says, I need to get a hold of Yat because he has to help me prioritize the risks, where do they get a hold of you?
So they can get a hold of me through email at this stage, and it's Yat, it's Y-A-T, at Blueshifts, it's BLUESHIFTS.ca. Email's a very easy way to get a hold of me. Alternatively, my direct line is 403-870-8565.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. But before I let you go, I'm going to throw a random question at you. And that question is, if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, famous or infamous, who would that person be and why?
I would say I would love to speak to Malcolm Gladwell. And the reason why is because Malcolm Gladwell has formulated a lot of ideas through what seems to be very, very different or not necessarily linear relationships. And so his ability to kind of connect and support thoughts and decisions and arguments and debates is absolutely fascinating. And the serendipitous nature in which he approaches how to be this creative with his thought process, taking very disparate kind of concepts and making sense of this world, I think that would be engaging and invigorating for my line of work, because I am trying to pull together a lot of what seems to be very different or unrelated types of situations. And as I said, risk ties us to everything. And so knowing how to kind of look for these serendipitous relationships is a real skill and highly entertaining if anyone's read any of his books.
Have you read Talking to Strangers?
Yes, I have just finished it. And
I finished it this morning because I was interviewing another guest and he said he was reading it. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even know you had a new book out. And so I finished it this morning and I was just absolutely fascinated by it. Yeah. 3 years
yes.
of research. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so it's great. It's entertaining, but it challenges you to think differently. And I think that's the value that he brings to the table.
Yeah, in every aspect of life. So excellent.
Yes.
Well, thank you again. And